Well, welcome back to another episode of The Quarantine Chef. I'm your host and chef, Jerry Saunders. Did you miss me? You probably noticed I've been gone for a while. I had to take a brief hiatus to get some things done, but now I'm back with another riveting episode. If you haven't noticed outside, it's getting pretty cold. Well, this is what I like to call Crockpot season. I want to introduce y'all to one of my favorite cooking utensils, my very own Crockpot here. This time of year is perfect because crock pots are great for making stews, chilies, and any other hot dishes you want. And the best thing of all is it does all the work. All you have to do is add the ingredients and walk away. How easy is that? Today we're going to make a variation on a traditional favorite, spicy crock pot beef stew. Let's get started. As I said before, one of the best things about cooking is that you can make your dish your own. Here's the ingredients that you need to make. So there's a few base ingredients and then there's some other ingredients I use for embellishment. You need Worcestershire sauce, olive oil, flour, beef broth, garlic powder, rosemary, thyme, celery, V8. I got the spicy version because I like to keep it hot. Onions, potatoes. Now, this is a little bit of a variant from usual. The recipe typically calls for white potatoes, but I found these gems in the grocery store and I chose them because they're easier to cut up and also they come with a seasoning pack that's going to enhance the flavor of this beef stew. You also need carrots and of course you need beef. Now, as far as optional ingredients, I included a couple things. I use Hot Shot, which is a blend of black pepper and red pepper. I use it on everything. Lowry seasoning salt, oxtail seasoning, and excess garlic powder. Now, I use these 4 items to go ahead and season my beef for the stew prior to getting started with cooking. Also, I'm going to throw in some sliced button mushrooms in the mix. And because I'm crazy and like to spice things up, I'm going to add one of these ghost chili peppers to my stew just to make sure that I'm not getting too cold in this change in weather. But enough about that. Let's start cooking. The first thing I did here was add about 4.5 tablespoons of flour, about 2 teaspoons of garlic. Now, if you're not into spice like I am, you can add at minimum a 1/2 teaspoon of garlic, but I love spices, so I went for it. I also added a little bit of salt and some fresh ground pepper. Now, this flour is going to go into the meat that has already been cut and prepared here and used as a coating for browning. Why use flour in this process, you're probably asking? Well, the flour helps to brown the meat, which is one of the best things you can do to enhance the flavor of your beef stew. Browning is pretty simple. You just add some oil to a pan and you want to saute your beef in the pan until it gets a little bit brown on each side. Again, this will enhance the flavor and bring out some of the juice in the beef, and it actually will definitely make your stew taste a lot better. Let's go. And as you can see here, I've gone ahead and added the flour to the beef and mixed it together. You can see how the flour mixture is evenly coated over the beef tips. Now, just a couple of notes about the beef that I used. The recipe technically calls for stewed beef. I just used what I had in my refrigerator because I had about 3 pounds of beef sirloin tips and top sirloin steak that I needed to use. So that's what I used. You really only need about 2 pounds of stewed beef, but I had 3, and that's how it's going down. Also note that for every 1 pound of beef, you need about 1.5 tablespoons of flour to coat adequately, which is where I got the 4.5 tablespoons of flour from. Let's get to browning. So while we're waiting on our oil to heat up in the pan to brown our beef, let me show you what I did to prepare the other ingredients. Check it out. You all know my motto is work smarter, not harder. So I went ahead and went to the store and bought a tub of pre-cut yellow onion. You need about 1 onion's worth, which is 1 container. You can get this at any local supermarket. I got about a pound of carrots. Now I use baby carrots because they're smaller and it takes less work to have to cut them up. So basically they already come in short pieces. I just cut them into bite-sized cuts so they cook a little more evenly and tenderly in the crock pot. I also got about 6 stalks of celery that I cut into bite-sized pieces. Then my optional ingredients here, I had about 4 ounces of button mushrooms that I sliced up because I love mushrooms. And last but not least, I got a ghost pepper here that I punched a hole in the side. Now, these are quite spicy, which is why I'm only adding 1. And I punched a hole in it to let the juice from the stew seep into the pepper and get some of the spice out of the pepper. Now, for the folks that don't like spice, don't get crazy with this. I love spice, so this is where I'm headed with it. So at this point, the pan's heating up. We're going to brown our beef and our onions in the pan. But while we're waiting, we can go ahead and add all the other ingredients to the crock pot and walk away from it. One thing I forgot to mention you all is about these potatoes. Like I said, the recipe calls for about 3 cups of potatoes, which equals about a pound of potatoes. Now, again, my work smarter, not harder thought process led me to these right here for a couple of reasons. One, they're bite-sized, so they're going to cook, more tenderly and more evenly in the crock pot. 2, because they're bite-sized, I don't have to go through and peel whole potatoes and dice them up. The other reason I like this is because these potatoes actually had a herb seasoning mix that came in the pack. So what I did was added about a tablespoon of olive oil to the cut up potatoes, which I quartered, and then I added the seasoning mix just to stir it up. Now they're going to go in the pot with the rest of the veggies. Dumping these bad boys right in. You can already look and tell this is going to be the bomb once it's done. I haven't even put the meat in yet, and it's already looking like a good stew. So after I get all this done and brown the meat and the onions, I'm going to stir it all together, and then we're good to go. So now we started browning our meat. You hear that sizzling? Yeah, I know you do. That's the magic happening. As a pro tip, you generally want to cook your beef and your onions in small separate batches. It helps them to cook more evenly. However, I don't have that kind of time. I got to get my son from school and I want to get this started, so I'm not eating beef stew at 10 o'clock at night. I'll let you know when we get done. And as you can see, our beef is browned here and we're about ready to start. Now, I brought you back to this empty pan to give you an important message. If you notice, there's a lot of little bits of grease and stuff like that stuck to the bottom of the pan. Now, if you don't know, this is actually where a lot of your flavor is left over from when you were cooking your beef and your onions. So it really is important to try to get that stuff off and into your beef stew. Now, you can do this a couple of ways. The main way that people do it is by deglazing, which is a fancy word for using an agent to get the rest of the drippings off the bottom of your pan. Or you can do it old school like grandma does it and just scrape the pan into the crock pot. Now, I don't typically recommend that because you can do some damage to your pan, especially if you have a nonstick pan. You can scrape your nonstick coating off of the pan. I'm going to use red wine vinegar as a deglazer in this particular instance. All you need is a splash, swirl it around, and dump it into your crock pot. I got my red wine vinegar in the pan. You see it sizzling. I'm just going to take my nonstick spatula here and sweep it around the pan. This will gently scrape up any loose bits of debris that you really want in your crock pot meal. It only takes a few seconds. And once you're done, you just dump this right into your crock pot. So as you can see, I've added all my ingredients and given it a quick stir, and now the crock pot will do all the rest. You're probably thinking, man, that stew already looks good. Yeah, me too, but it's not even ready to go yet. We're gonna put it on high for about 4 to 5 hours, or if you want, which I actually prefer, low for 8 to 9 hours. Now, again, I don't have that kind of time because I'm gonna be well hungry before 8 hours is done. So I'm gonna set this thing on high for 6 hours, but check it somewhere around 4.5 to 5 hours. You're also probably thinking, man, this beef stew looks really juicy. Well, yeah, it is right now, but don't worry. I'm gonna add a thickening agent a little bit later, some cornstarch water to thicken it up. And I'm also gonna add another ingredient towards the end, which is frozen peas, which will also add extra flavor to the beef stew and will also help to absorb some of the liquid. So let's get this started. I'll check back in with you in about 4.5 hours. So we've hit about 5 hours in the crock pot right now. I went ahead and added 3/4 cups of frozen peas and used cornstarch water in a 1-to-1 mix to thicken up the stew here. Look at all that goodness right there. That's just love. Well, it's another one in the books for me. It's the Quarantine Chef signing off. I don't know what you all are about to do, but I'm getting ready to eat. Until next time, y'all take care and be good.